Sir, those two live under the bridge. The little girl told the millionaire, so they go to the bridge together, and what they discover is incredible. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10, and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. Arthur Sterling's tears fell on the cold marble of the two empty tombs, mixing with the light rain that began to wet St. Anthony's Cemetery in Havenwood. At 52, the businessman, owner of Sterling Construction, had lost everything that mattered in the world exactly 2 years ago. The tombs of Liam and Noah, his 6-year-old twins, remained without bodies, mere markers of a pain that consumed every day of his existence. "Why did you leave me?" he murmured, kneeling on the damp earth. His hands trembled as he placed 2 white roses on the headstones he himself had commissioned, hoping against all hope that one day he could bring his sons home. The accident had happened on a Sunday afternoon. Martha, his wife, had taken the boys to visit their grandmother in a neighboring town. The car had plummeted from the bridge over the Clearwater River during a storm. Martha had survived with minor injuries, but the twins' bodies were never found, lost in the murky, deep waters of the river that cut through the region. Arthur closed his eyes, trying to push away the memories that tormented him. Liam always ran through the house with that mischievous smile, while Noah followed him, quieter but equally affectionate. They were physically identical but completely different in personality. Liam had a scar on his left knee from when he fell off his bike at age 4, and Noah had the peculiar habit of furrowing his brow when he was thinking about something important. "Sir," a tiny voice pulled him from his thoughts. Arthur looked up and saw a scrawny little girl, about 4 years old, standing a few feet away. Her clothes were dirty and torn, her brown hair tangled from lack of care. In her small hands, she held an equally battered cloth doll. "What do you want, child?" he asked, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. "My name is Isabella," she said, approaching timidly. "I saw you crying. Did you lose someone important?" Arthur felt a tightness in his chest. There was something in the innocence of that girl that touched his wounded soul. "I lost my sons," he replied, his voice hoarse with emotion. Isabella tilted her head, observing him with her large, dark eyes. "Were they little like me?" "A little bigger. They were twins, 6 years old." The girl was silent for a moment, as if processing the information. Then her eyes lit up with a strange expression. "Sir," she said, her voice as low as a whisper, "I know 2 identical blonde boys. They live under the Clearwater River Bridge." Arthur's heart raced. He stood up abruptly, nearly stumbling. "What did you say?" "2 identical boys," Isabella repeated, pointing toward the river. "They don't talk much, but they're very quiet. Grandma Rose takes care of them." Arthur's hands began to shake. Could it be possible? After 2 years of fruitless searching, of divers who scoured the river without finding anything, could it be possible that his sons were alive? "Can you take me to them?" he asked, trying to control the anxiety that was taking over his body. Isabella nodded and began to walk down the dirt road that led to the town center. Arthur followed her, his heart beating so hard he could hear the sound in his ears. Every step was a mix of hope and terror. Hope of finding his children, terror that it was just another cruel coincidence. As they walked, Isabella chattered about her life on the streets, about how she slept under awnings and scavenged for food in restaurant trash. Arthur could barely focus on her words, all his attention on the destination of their walk. They reached the bank of the Clearwater River as the sun began to set. Under the old concrete bridge, Arthur could see a kind of makeshift shelter made of tarps and pieces of wood. Smoke rose from a small fire, and he could make out a few figures moving in the twilight. "Grandma Rose!" shouted Isabella, running toward the camp. "I brought a visitor." An elderly woman, about 60 years old, emerged from behind one of the tarps. Her grey hair was tied in a messy bun, and she wore simple but clean clothes. There was something familiar about her face, but Arthur couldn't place it. "Isabella, how many times have I told you not to go off alone?" the woman scolded, but her tone was affectionate. "Sorry, Grandma, but look, I brought a gentleman who lost his sons. I told him about Leo and Luke." Arthur felt the world spin upon hearing those names. "Leo and Luke," he repeated, his voice coming out as a whisper. Rose observed him with curiosity, noticing his agitation. "Yes, they're two boys I found 2 years ago, injured and with no memory. Why do you ask?" Before Arthur could answer, 2 boys emerged from the shelter. They were blonde, about 6 years old, with angelic faces marked by the hard life on the streets. When Arthur saw them, his legs almost gave out. The resemblance to Liam and Noah was stunning. The same face shape, the same hair color, even the height seemed compatible. One of the boys, whom Rose called Luke, limped slightly on his left leg. "My God," Arthur murmured, tears welling up in his eyes. "Liam! Noah!" The boys looked at him with curiosity, but without any recognition. Luke hid behind Rose, while Leo remained observing the strange man with a serious expression. "They don't remember anything," Rose explained, noticing Arthur's reaction. "When I found them, they were injured and spoke a strange language. It took a while for them to start speaking English." Arthur approached slowly, as if before a miracle. May I look closer?" Rose hesitated, but something in the man's desperate expression made her nod. Arthur knelt in front of Luke, observing every detail of his face. Then, his eyes fixed on the boy's left leg. "Do you have a scar on your knee?" he asked, his voice trembling. Luke looked at Rose, who encouraged him with a nod. Slowly the boy lifted his pant leg, revealing a small but visible scar, exactly in the same place where Liam had his. Arthur's world crumbled and rebuilt itself in the same instant. His sons were alive. Night had completely fallen when Arthur finally managed to convince Rose to let him take the boys to his house. The woman had initially resisted, suspicious of the intentions of the well-dressed stranger who appeared out of nowhere, claiming to be the father of the children she had been caring for 2 years. "They are my responsibility," Rose said, protectively hugging Leo and Luke. "I found them hurt, hungry, with no one in the world. I cared for them as if they were my own grandsons." Arthur understood the woman's resistance, but the urgency to confirm his suspicions consumed him. "Please, just for one night. I want a doctor to examine them. If they really are my sons, they need proper care." It was Isabella who broke the impasse. "Grandma, the gentleman seems kind, and the boys can sleep in a real bed tonight." Rose looked at the boys, who remained silent, watching the conversation. Leo held Luke's hand, and both seemed lost in their own silent worlds. Finally she sighed. "All right, but I'm going with you, and if you do anything to them—" "I won't do anything but care for them," Arthur promised, his voice choked with emotion. The Sterling family mansion was in the most exclusive neighborhood of Havenwood. When the automatic gate opened and they entered the illuminated garden, Isabella let out a gasp of astonishment. She had never seen such a large and beautiful house. Martha Sterling was in the main living room when she heard the car in the garage. At 48, she still had the natural beauty that had won Arthur over decades ago, but her green eyes had lost their sparkle since the loss of her sons. Her blonde hair, once always impeccable, was now kept in a simple bun that didn't require much care. When she saw her husband enter, accompanied by a strange woman, 2 blonde children, and a dirty little girl, Martha felt her chest tighten. There was something in Arthur's expression she hadn't seen in 2 years, hope. "Arthur, what's happening?" she asked, slowly rising from the sofa where she was reading a book. "Martha, I may have found our sons," he said, his voice trembling. The book slipped from Martha's hands, falling to the floor with a dry thud. She looked at the two blonde boys hiding behind Rose, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, Arthur, don't do this to me. Look at them, Martha. Look closely." But Martha backed away, her hands trembling. "Our sons are dead, Arthur. I was in the car. I saw them disappear into the water. Don't make me relive this." Tears began to stream down Martha's face as she ran upstairs, leaving an awkward silence in the room. Arthur closed his eyes, knowing his wife's reaction was understandable. She had been through terrible trauma, blaming herself daily for the accident. "The children are hungry," Rose said, breaking the silence. "Can I use your kitchen?" Of course," Arthur replied, trying to compose himself. "Maria, our housekeeper, must have left food in the fridge. I'll show you the way." In the spacious kitchen, Isabella marveled at the modern appliances, while Leo and Luke sat at the solid wood table with the same serious, silent expression they had maintained since they arrived. As Rose prepared sandwiches, Arthur watched the boys' every move. Leo had a particular way of frowning when he was concentrating, exactly like Noah used to do. And when Luke smiled shyly at Isabella, Arthur saw the same mischievous grin that Liam always had. "What were your names before?" Arthur asked gently, sitting at the table. The boys looked at each other but remained silent. It was Rose who answered. "They don't remember anything from before I found them. At first, they spoke in a strange language. It sounded like German. It took months for them to start understanding English." "German?" Arthur frowned. That didn't make sense. His sons had never spoken German. "That's why I chose the names Leo and Luke," Rose continued. "They didn't respond when I tried other names, so I made these up for them." Arthur felt a hint of doubt creep into his chest, but he quickly pushed it away. Luke's scar was too specific to be a coincidence. After dinner, Arthur settled everyone upstairs. He gave Rose the guest room, put Isabella in the old playroom he had kept untouched, and took Leo and Luke to what had been his son's room. The room remained exactly as Liam and Noah had left it 2 years ago. Toys scattered on the floor, twin beds with car-themed sheets, children's drawings taped to the wall. When Leo and Luke entered, they stopped at the door, observing everything with wide eyes. "This is where you used to sleep," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. Luke approached one of the beds and picked up a teddy bear that was on the pillow. For a moment, Arthur thought he saw a flicker of recognition in the boy's eyes, but it was so fast it could have been his imagination. Leo walked to the wall where the drawings were and touched one of them with his fingertips. It was a crayon drawing of a happy family, a man, a woman, and 2 blonde boys holding hands. "Do you remember anything?" Arthur insisted. The boys shook their heads, but continued to explore the room with a curiosity that seemed to go beyond simple novelty. Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Martha cried silently, hugging a pillow. The presence of those children in the house had reopened wounds she had been struggling to heal for 2 years. How could Arthur be so cruel, bringing strangers into the house and calling them Liam and Noah? She got up and went to the window overlooking the garden. Down below, she could see the light on in the boys' room. For a moment, she considered going down and kicking everyone out, but something stopped her. What if Arthur was right? What if, by some impossible miracle, those really were her sons? Back in the children's room, Arthur tucked Leo and Luke into their old beds. The boys seemed exhausted, but their eyes remained alert, as if they weren't used to sleeping indoors. "Good night, my boys," Arthur whispered, kissing both their foreheads. As he was leaving the room, he heard Leo murmur something very quietly. He stopped and turned. "What was that, son?" Leo looked at him with those serious eyes that so resembled Noah's and said in broken English, "Thank you. Udis, Daddy." Arthur's heart nearly exploded with emotion. It was the confirmation he needed. His sons were alive, they were home, and maybe, slowly, they would begin to remember who they were. But in the next room, Rose lay awake, worried. There was something about Arthur's story that didn't add up. The boys she had found 2 years ago were wearing small medals around their necks, medals with names engraved on them, names she had never mentioned to anyone, German names that read Maximilian and Friedrich. The morning arrived with the golden clarity typical of Havenwood, but Arthur had spent the entire night awake, pacing the mansion's corridors and peeking into the room where those he believed to be his lost sons slept. Every breath the boys took was music to his ears, every movement under the covers a confirmation that he wasn't dreaming. At 7 in the morning, he decided to call Dr. Henry Wallace, the family neurologist and a personal friend for over 20 years. If anyone could scientifically confirm his suspicions, it was him. "Henry, I need you to come to my house urgently," Arthur said into the phone, trying to control the anxiety in his voice. "Arthur, it's 7 in the morning. Did something happen?" "I found my sons." The silence on the other end of the line lasted for long seconds. Dr. Wallace knew Arthur's mental state over the past 2 years well, knew how the loss of the twins had deeply affected the businessman. "Arthur, my friend, I think we should talk calmly. They're here in my house, 2 blonde boys. The age Liam and Noah would be today. One of them has the same scar on his knee that Liam had." Dr. Wallace sighed. He had seen many cases of parents who, consumed by grief, saw their dead children in other kids. It was a known and extremely painful psychological phenomenon. "I'll be there in an hour," he finally said. "But Arthur, prepare yourself for the possibility that—" "Just come," Arthur interrupted, hanging up the phone. Upstairs, Martha had only managed a few hours of sleep. She woke to the sound of children's voices from the next room, voices she momentarily confused with Liam's and Noah's, before reality hit her like a punch to the gut. She got dressed and went down to the kitchen, where she found a scene that made her heart ache. Rose was preparing breakfast while talking quietly with Isabella. Leo and Luke were sitting at the table, eating bread with jam. And for a moment, Martha could imagine it was any other morning 2 years ago. "Good morning, Ma'am," Rose said respectfully. "I hope you don't mind me using your kitchen." Martha just nodded, unable to speak. She watched the boys, noticing every detail of their features. The resemblance to Liam and Noah was disturbing, but something in their behavior was different. Her sons were chatterboxes in the morning, always competing for their parents' attention. These boys ate in silence, with a seriousness that didn't fit 6-year-old children. "Where did you learn English?" Martha finally asked, her voice hoarse. "Grandma Rose taught us," Leo replied, looking at her with that serious expression that so resembled Noah's. "And before that, how did you communicate?" The boys glanced at each other as if sharing a secret. Luke murmured something in a strange language to Leo, who nodded. "Is that how you used to talk?" Martha insisted. "We don't remember," Luke said, but his gaze shifted, as if he were hiding something. Just then, Arthur entered the kitchen, wearing an impeccable suit despite the rough night. His eyes lit up when he saw the boys having breakfast at his table. "Good morning, my sons," he said, kissing Leo's and Luke's foreheads. Martha felt a wave of anger rise in her chest. "Stop it, Arthur. Stop calling them that." "But they are our sons, Martha. Look at them." "Our sons are dead," she exploded, tears starting to flow. "I saw the water take them away. I tried to save them, but I couldn't. They're gone, Arthur." The ensuing silence was awkward. Isabella hid behind Rose, while Leo and Luke watched the argument with wide, frightened eyes. "Maybe I should take the children for a walk in the garden," Rose suggested diplomatically. When they were alone in the kitchen, Martha collapsed into sobs. "You can't do this to me, Arthur. I know you're suffering, but bringing these children home, pretending they're our sons, it will only make everything worse." "And what if they really are Liam and Noah?" Arthur insisted. "What if by some miracle they survived? Then why don't they remember us? Why did they speak German? Why?" "Do?" Martha stopped mid-sentence, realizing she too had noticed the inconsistencies. It was at that moment that Dr. Wallace arrived. Tall, grey-haired, with prescription glasses and an always serious demeanor, he greeted Martha warmly before following Arthur to the garden, where the children were playing under Rose's watchful eyes. "So these are the boys," Dr. Wallace said, observing Leo and Luke with a clinical eye. "Dr. Wallace, I want you to examine them. I want medical confirmation that they are my sons." The doctor approached the children with a gentle smile. "Hello, boys. My name is Henry. I'm a doctor and a friend of Mr. Sterling's." Leo and Luke instinctively recoiled, clinging to Rose. Dr. Wallace noticed the reaction and frowned. Liam and Noah had known him since they were babies and were always excited for his visits. "May I ask a few questions?" he continued, crouching to be at the boys' level. "They don't really like strangers," Rose explained. Dr. Wallace spent the next 20 minutes asking simple questions and observing the boys' reactions. He tested their reflexes, examined the scar on Luke's knee, and observed their language and behavior patterns. When he finished, he asked to speak with Arthur in private in his office. "Well?" Arthur asked anxiously as soon as they closed the door. Dr. Wallace took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a habit he had when he needed to deliver difficult news. "Arthur, these boys show clear signs of severe amnesia. That would explain why they don't remember you. So they could be my sons. It's possible. A severe trauma, like a car accident and near drowning, could cause this type of memory loss. But Arthur," he hesitated. "But what?" "The scar on Luke's knee isn't old. It's recent, from a year ago at most, and the healing pattern suggests surgery, not a household accident like the one Liam had." Arthur felt the world sway beneath his feet. "Are you sure? I have enough experience to distinguish old scars from recent ones. And there's something else. When I spoke to them in English, I noticed a very subtle accent. It's not the accent of a child relearning to speak. It's the accent of someone who learned English as a second language." "But what about the physical resemblance?" "It's striking, I admit. But Arthur, you need to consider the possibility that your desperation is making you see things that aren't there." At that moment, urgent knocks on the office door interrupted the conversation. It was Martha, her face pale, and an envelope in her hands. "Arthur, you need to see this," she said, entering without permission. "What is it?" "I just got a call from Walter, the investigator. Remember, I hired him last week to look into the accident?" Arthur frowned. He didn't know his wife had hired a private investigator. "He found something," Martha continued, holding out the envelope. "He found records of a German couple who lost twins in the same region, around the same time we lost our sons." With trembling hands, Arthur opened the envelope and pulled out several photos and documents. They were German newspaper clippings about the disappearance of two twins, the sons of Hans and Greta Schmidt, who were visiting relatives in rural Ohio when their car crashed near the Clearwater River. But what made Arthur's blood run cold were the photos of the missing children. Maximilian and Friedrich Schmidt were identical to Leo and Luke. The photographs spread across the office desk seemed to mock Arthur as he studied them for the 10th time. Maximilian and Friedrich Schmidt smiled for the camera in one of the photos, wearing traditional German clothes, surrounded by a happy blonde family. The resemblance to Leo and Luke was so perfect it was unsettling. "This doesn't prove anything," Arthur murmured, his voice sounding more like an attempt to convince himself than others. "A lot of children look alike." Martha watched her husband with a mixture of pity and frustration. Arthur, look at the dates. The German boys disappeared exactly 3 days after our sons, in the same river. Dr. Wallace examined the documents with professional attention. It says here that Hans and Greta Schmidt were visiting distant relatives on a farm near Havenwood. Their car was found submerged in the Clearwater River, but the children's bodies were never recovered. Just like our case, Martha whispered, the words coming out like a blade. But that would mean... Arthur stopped mid-sentence, unable to complete the thought. It would mean he was clinging to a cruel fantasy, that the boys sleeping in his house were the sons of other parents who were also suffering the same unbearable pain. A soft knock on the door interrupted the tense silence. It was Rose, with Isabella clinging to her skirt and a worried expression on her face. "Excuse me, Mr. Sterling, the boys are asking where you are, and, well, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" Arthur asked, trying to control the tremor in his voice. Rose looked at Dr. Wallace and Martha, hesitant. "Maybe it's better if we talk in private. You can speak in front of them. They're my family." The woman took a deep breath. "When I found Leo and Luke, they were wearing necklaces with small medals. I kept the medals, thinking they might be important one day." Arthur's heart raced. "What kind of medals?" "Silver medals with names engraved on them. Names. German names." The silence that followed was deafening. Martha covered her face with her hands, while Dr. Wallace sighed deeply. "What names?" Arthur asked, though a part of him already knew the answer. "Maximilian and Friedrich," Rose said quietly. Arthur's legs gave out, and he leaned on the desk. The entire world he had rebuilt in his mind over the last 24 hours collapsed at once. The boys sleeping in his house, in the rooms of his dead sons, were the children of other parents. Parents who were also crying, also suffering, also had empty graves in some German cemetery. "Why didn't you say this before?" Martha asked, her voice laced with anger. "Because I saw the hope in Mr. Sterling's eyes," Rose replied, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "And because these boys are better off here than under the bridge. They have food, a warm bed, affection. I didn't want to destroy that." Isabella, who had been quiet the whole time, tugged on Rose's skirt. "Grandma, did I do something wrong?" "Why do you ask that, dear?" "Because I didn't know the boys before. I lied when I said I knew them." The 4-year-old's confession landed like a bomb in the already tense room. "I just wanted someone to take me to a nice house. I wanted a family." Arthur looked at the child, seeing in her big eyes the same neediness he felt. Isabella had lied out of desperation, just as he was clinging to a lie out of desperation. "Where are the medals now?" asked Dr. Wallace. "In a box, at my shelter. I can get them if you want." "Get them," Martha said firmly, "and bring everything you found with them. Clothes, toys, anything." After Rose left, Arthur collapsed into his leather office chair. "My sons are really gone," he said, his voice breaking. "Arthur." "Doctor," Wallace began. "No. Let me accept this. Liam and Noah died 2 years ago. I was just refusing to accept reality." Martha approached her husband and placed a hand on his shoulder. It was the first affectionate physical contact between them in months. "We were both refusing to accept it, but that doesn't mean we should abandon these boys now." "What do you mean?" "They're not to blame for not being our sons. And if there are German parents looking for them, we need to do the right thing." 2 hours later, Rose returned with an old cardboard box. Inside, besides the medals with the German names, were good quality children's clothes, clearly European, and a teddy bear with a German tag. Dr. Wallace examined the medals under a magnifying glass. "They're authentic, good quality silver with professional engraving." "We have to contact the German police," Martha said, "and the consulate." "No," Arthur protested suddenly. "Not yet. Arthur, you can't. Just give me a few days. I need to be absolutely sure. I want to do DNA tests. Dr. Wallace nodded. That's wise. Even with all this evidence, it's better to have scientific confirmation. That evening, during dinner, Arthur watched Leo and Luke eat silently. He knew he should feel angry for being deceived, but all he felt was a deep sadness. He had grown attached to those boys in just one day, had allowed hope to bloom in his dead heart. "Leo, Luke," he said softly, "do you remember the names you had before?" The boys looked at each other nervously. Finally, Leo whispered, "Max and Fritz." "And do you know where you came from?" Luke nodded shyly. "From far away, in a place where it snows." Martha's heart ached. These children were victims too, separated from their real family, living on the streets without memories or identity. "Would you like to go back home?" she asked. The question seemed to confuse the boys. Leo frowned in that way that so resembled Noah and said, "Isn't this our home?" "You are always welcome here," Arthur assured them, fighting back tears. "But you have real parents who must be looking for you." "Like Daddy and Mommy looked for us?" Luke asked innocently. The question hit Arthur like a bullet. "Yes, somewhere in Germany. There was a couple going through the same agony that he and Martha had lived through. The difference was that their nightmare could have a happy ending." That night, after the children were asleep, Arthur called Walter, the private investigator Martha had hired. "Walter, I need you to find Hans and Greta Schmidt. I want to know if they're still alive, if they're still looking for their sons." I've been on this investigation since I found the first documents," Walter replied. "And I have news. They never stopped looking. They hired private detectives, offered rewards, ran campaigns in the German media. They're destroyed, Mr. Sterling, exactly as you were." Arthur closed his eyes, knowing there was only one possible decision to make. But before returning those boys to their real parents, he needed to make sure that Hans and Greta Schmidt were worthy people, that they would take good care of Maximilian and Friedrich. "Bring them to the United States," he said finally. "I want to meet them in person before I hand over the children." "Are you sure the reunion will be emotionally difficult for everyone involved?" "I'm sure those boys deserve to go home, and I need to look their parents in the eyes and know I'm doing the right thing." As he hung up the phone, Arthur didn't know that his decision would change all their lives in ways he could never have imagined. The next 3 days passed like a painful fog in the Sterling mansion. Arthur had become a shadow of himself, watching Leo and Luke play in the garden with the painful awareness that he would soon have to say goodbye to them. Each smile from the boys, each spontaneous moment of affection was like a knife twisting in his chest. Martha, on the other hand, had channeled her energy into caring for the children with an almost obsessive dedication. She cooked their favorite meals, read stories at bedtime, and for the first time in 2 years, her house once again had children's laughter echoing through the halls. "Why are you sad?" Leo asked one morning, finding Martha crying silently while folding clean clothes in the boys' room. "I'm not sad, dear," she lied, quickly drying her tears. "I'm just missing someone." "Missing who?" "2 boys who lived here before you. They looked a lot like you." Leo frowned in that characteristic way. "Did they go away?" "They went to a very faraway place," Martha replied, her voice almost a whisper. "Like we're going to do?" Leo's innocent question shattered Martha's heart. "You're going to a place where people who love you very much are waiting." That same morning, Walter called Arthur with news about his investigation. Hans and Greta Schmidt had agreed to travel to the United States immediately. The couple, who had spent 2 years in an agony similar to Arthur and Martha's, were desperate to confirm if the found boys were indeed their lost sons. "They arrive tomorrow afternoon," Walter informed him, "and Mr. Sterling, they are very hopeful. I asked them not to get their hopes up. But it's impossible to contain their emotion. Arthur understood perfectly. He himself had been on that emotional roller coaster for the past few days. Where will the meeting be? I thought a neutral environment would be best. I've booked a room at the Royalton Hotel downtown. It's more appropriate than at your house. After hanging up, Arthur found Rose in the garden, watching Isabella teach Leo and Luke how to make soap bubbles. The scene was so touching that he had to lean against the porch pillar. "Mr. Sterling," Rose said, approaching him, "may I ask you something?" "Of course. What will happen to me and Isabella when the boys leave?" The question caught Arthur off guard. He had been so focused on his own suffering that he hadn't considered the impact of the separation on the other people who had grown attached to the children. "You will always have a place here," he said, surprising himself with his own words. "Isabella can stay, get an education, have a decent life. And you took care of these boys when no one else did. You deserve to be treated like family." Tears welled up in Rose's tired eyes. "You would really do that? For a trash picker and a street girl?" "I would do it for two people who have shown more love and compassion than many wealthy people I know." That afternoon, Dr. Wallace brought the results of the DNA tests he had discreetly requested. Arthur received him in his office, his hands trembling as he awaited the final confirmation. "The results are conclusive," the doctor said, removing his glasses. "Leo and Luke have no genetic relationship to you or Martha." "And the supplementary tests?" "They confirm European origin, most likely German, considering the genetic markers. Arthur, there are no more doubts. These boys are Maximilian and Friedrich Schmidt." Arthur nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and devastation. Relief to finally be sure, devastation to confirm that his real sons were truly lost forever. "There's something else," Dr. Wallace continued. "I did some additional neurological exams on the boys. Their amnesia is starting to recede. Small memories are returning." "What kind of memories?" "Fragments. Luke told me he dreamed of a blonde woman singing a song in German. Leo remembered a big, fluffy dog. These are signs that the proximity of the reunion with their parents might be stimulating their recovery." The next morning, Arthur woke up earlier than usual and found Leo sitting alone in the kitchen, looking out the window with a thoughtful expression. "Can't sleep, son?" he asked, sitting next to the boy. "I'm remembering things," Leo said quietly, "things from before living under the bridge." "What kind of things?" "A big house with snow outside, and a woman who made star-shaped cookies." Leo paused, frowning. "And a tall man who put me on his shoulder to reach apples on the tree." Arthur's chest tightened. The returning memories were clearly of Hans and Greta, of the real parents who would soon be there. "Do you miss those people?" he asked. Leo thought for a moment. "I do. But I don't want to leave you either. You and Mrs. Martha are good to us." "And we always will be," Arthur promised, "even if you go back to where you belong." At 2 in the afternoon, the entire family headed to the Royalton Hotel. Martha had dressed Leo and Luke in their best clothes, combing their hair with care, as if preparing them for something solemn. Isabella held Rose's hand tightly, scared by all the adult tension. The room Walter had reserved was spacious and comfortable, with large windows overlooking the historic center of Havenwood. When they arrived, Hans and Greta Schmidt were already there, sitting side by side on a sofa, their hands clasped in a union of nervousness and hope. Hans was a tall, blond man, about 40 years old, with blue eyes that were red from restrained emotion. Greta was a delicate woman, also blonde, wearing a navy blue coat that couldn't hide the tremor in her shoulders. When Leo and Luke entered the room, the silence was absolute. Hans and Greta stood up slowly, as if seeing ghosts. For long seconds, no one moved, no one spoke. Then Greta whispered a word in German. Meine Jungen. My boys. Leo took a step forward, observing the blonde woman with growing curiosity. Ich erinnere mich an Sie, he said suddenly, the words coming out in pure German. I remember you. Greta collapsed into tears, falling to her knees and stretching out her arms. Leo ran to her without hesitation, followed by Luke, who had also been touched by some ancestral memory. Max! Fritz! Greta cried, hugging her sons as if she would never let them go. Wir haben nie aufgehört zu suchen. We never stopped searching. Hans joined the embrace, his German composure crumbling as he held the sons he had given up for dead. The family was reunited, but in the corner of the room, Arthur and Martha watched with broken hearts, knowing they were witnessing the end of a dream that had kept them alive for the past few days. The reunion was complete, but one last revelation awaited them all. A truth that would forever change the understanding of who Rose really was. The reunion at the Royalton Hotel lasted for 3 emotionally intense hours. Hans and Greta couldn't stop touching their sons, as if they needed to physically confirm it wasn't a dream. Maximilian and Friedrich, their real names seemed strange after weeks of being called Leo and Luke, alternated between moments of clear recognition and childlike confusion. How did they survive? Hans asked in broken English, addressing Arthur. The police said the car was completely submerged. Arthur looked at Rose, who had remained quiet in a corner of the room, watching the reunion with an indecipherable expression. It was this lady who saved them. Rose found them injured on the riverbank and cared for them for 2 years. Hans and Greta turned to the elderly woman, who shyly lowered her eyes. Wir können Ihnen nie genug danken, Greta said, her words filled with deep gratitude. We can never thank you enough. I only did what any mother would do, Rose replied, her voice hoarse with emotion. During the conversation that followed, it became clear that Hans and Greta were good, loving people. Hans worked as an engineer in Munich and Greta was a primary school teacher. They had come to the US to visit distant cousins who lived on an isolated farm when the accident happened. We wanted to show Max and Fritz where their great-grandmother came from, Greta explained. My grandmother's family emigrated from here to Germany in the 1920s. And now? Asked Martha, who had remained almost silent throughout the meeting. Are you taking them back to Germany? Hans and Greta exchanged glances. Not immediately, Hans said. The children have suffered a severe trauma. We want the transition to be gradual, so as not to traumatize them further. Besides, Greta added, we would like to get to know the people who cared for our sons better. You've become a part of their lives. Arthur felt a pang of surprise. He had expected the German parents to want to take their children away immediately. What are you proposing? He asked. We'd like to stay here in Havenwood for a few weeks, Hans said. Rent a house, let the children get used to us again, but keep in touch with you. It would be a smoother transition. The proposal brought both relief and pain to Arthur and Martha. More time with the boys meant more suffering when the final separation came, but also the opportunity to ensure they would be okay. As they left the hotel, Maximilian, it was still hard not to think of him as Leo, ran to Arthur and hugged his legs. Daddy Arthur, can I still play in your garden? Arthur's heart shattered upon hearing the affectionate nickname. Of course you can, my boy, whenever you want. That night, back at the mansion, a difficult conversation took place between Arthur and Martha in the master bedroom. They are good parents, Martha said, taking off her earrings and preparing for bed. I can see the love in their eyes when they look at the boys. I know, that should make me feel better, but it only makes it harder, she completed. Because we know we're doing the right thing, but it still hurts as if we're losing our sons all over again. Arthur sat on the bed, his head in his hands. Martha, I've been thinking about something. What if we adopted Isabella? Martha stopped brushing her hair and turned to face him. Arthur, she has no one in the world. She's smart, affectionate, and, well, she's lost everything too, like us. Are you sure you're not just trying to fill the void that Max and Fritz will leave? Arthur thought carefully before answering. Maybe that's part of it, but it's also because she deserves a chance. She deserves a family. Martha sat next to her husband. We need to think this through. Adopting a child isn't something you do on an emotional impulse. I know, but Martha, when was the last time we saw a child genuinely smile in our house? Isabella brought light in here. While the parents discussed the future, in the room that had been Liam and Noah's, Maximilian and Friedrich slept restlessly. Their dreams were filled with fragmented memories, some of life in Germany with Hans and Greta, others of the 2 years living under the bridge with Rose, and still others of the last few days in the mansion with Arthur and Martha. In the guest room, Rose couldn't sleep. She watched Isabella sleeping peacefully beside her and fought against memories she had buried for decades. Arthur's presence, the conversations about family, all of it had awakened recollections she preferred to keep forgotten. She rose silently and went to the window overlooking the moonlit garden. There, she allowed tears to flow freely for the first time in years. She knew this house. She knew these gardens. She had played in them as a child more than 30 years ago, before the terrible fight that had cast her out forever. Before she became Rose, the trash picker. She had been Hope Sterling, Arthur's younger sister. The irony of the situation was almost unbearable. She had spent 2 years caring for the boys her brother believed were his lost sons, without ever revealing her true identity. And now, watching him suffer through another separation, she knew she had to make a decision. But there was another secret, even deeper. Isabella was not just a street girl she had taken in out of compassion. She was her granddaughter, the daughter of Catherine, the child she herself had given birth to on the streets 10 years ago, the result of an abusive relationship with a man who abandoned her when he learned of the pregnancy. Catherine had grown up on the streets, like Rose, but had tried to build a better life. She got a job, rented a small room, even fell in love with a young man who promised to take care of her and Isabella. But the man was a drug addict, and one desperate night he stole the money Catherine had saved to buy medicine for Isabella when the girl fell ill. The ensuing argument ended tragically. Catherine fell down the stairs of the tenement where they lived, hitting her head. When Rose arrived at the hospital, her daughter had already passed away, leaving Isabella an orphan at 3 years old. Since then, Rose had cared for her granddaughter as if she were her own child, but she never told her the truth about her origins. It was too painful to explain to such a young child that she was the granddaughter of a woman society saw only as human trash. Now, watching Arthur offer a home to Isabella, Rose faced the most difficult dilemma of her life. Should she reveal the truth and give her brother the chance to know his great niece? Or should she keep the secret and allow him to adopt the girl without knowing the blood connection between them? The next morning, Hans and Greta came to pick up the boys for a walk around the city. It was part of the gradual reconnection process, allowing them to get used to their biological parents again without abruptly cutting ties with the family that had welcomed them. "We'll be back before dinner," Greta promised, noticing Martha's poorly disguised anxiety. After they left, the house became strangely quiet. Isabella played alone in the garden while Rose watched her from the porch, wrestling with the decision she knew she had to make. It was then that Arthur approached her. "Rose, may I speak with you?" "Of course, Mr. Sterling. Martha and I have been talking. We would like to officially adopt Isabella, give her a permanent home, an education, everything a child deserves." Rose closed her eyes, knowing the moment of truth had arrived. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice trembling, There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago. What is it? Rose took a deep breath, gathering courage for the words that would change everything. My real name isn't Rose, it's Hope. Hope Sterling. Arthur's world stopped the moment he heard the name he hadn't heard in over 30 years. Hope, his younger sister, who had disappeared from their lives after a devastating family fight when he was just 20 and she was 17. That's impossible, he murmured, looking at the woman's face before him with new eyes. Now that he knew who to look for, he could see familiar traits in the features aged by a hard life on the streets. The same dark eyes, the same nose shape, the same stubborn jawline that characterized the Sterlings. It is possible, Hope said, tears streaming down her cheeks, and there's much more you need to know. Hope! My God, Hope! Arthur reached for her, his hands outstretched, but she instinctively pulled back. No, Arthur. First, let me explain everything. Then you can decide if you still want to touch me. Arthur stopped where he was, his heart racing. 30 years of guilt and regret resurfaced all at once. The fight that had separated the siblings had been about inheritance. When their father died, Arthur, as the eldest son, had inherited the construction company and the majority of the assets. Hope had contested the will, claiming she deserved an equal share. The argument had escalated into terrible accusations. Arthur, young and arrogant, had said unforgivable things about her being just a woman who didn't understand business. Hope had responded with equal cruelty, promising he would regret treating his own sister like a stranger. She had left that very night, taking only a small suitcase, and had never returned. Hope, I looked for you for years, Arthur said, his voice broken with emotion. I hired detectives, placed ads in newspapers. I know. But I didn't want to be found. I was too angry, my pride too wounded. Hope wiped her face with the back of her hand. And by the time that anger finally passed, it was too late. I'd become someone you wouldn't recognize as a sister. What happened to you all these years? Hope looked at Isabella, who was playing carefree in the garden, unaware that her life was about to change forever. At first, I tried to survive with dignity. I got a job as a secretary in Chicago, rented a small room, tried to build an independent life. But it was hard for a single woman in the 90s. The wages were low, the rents high. She paused, gathering the courage to continue. I met a man, Anthony. He seemed kind, promised to take care of me. I ended up getting pregnant. Arthur's stomach clenched, realizing where the story was headed. When I told him about the pregnancy, he abandoned me, said I was trying to trap him with lies. Hope's voice turned bitter. I lost my job due to absences during the complicated pregnancy, couldn't pay the rent, ended up on the street. My God, Hope. Catherine was born in a public hospital, a beautiful, healthy child, but I had no way to properly support her. We lived on charity, slept in shelters when there was space, on the street when there wasn't. Arthur closed his eyes, imagining his younger sister, who had been raised like a princess in the family mansion, living in extreme poverty. Catherine grew up on the streets, but she was smart, determined. At 15, she got a job at a diner, started saving money. She rented a small room for both of us. Hope's face lit up for a moment. She had dreams, you know. She wanted to study, have a career, give a better life to any children she might have. And then she fell in love with a young man, Lucas. He seemed good at first, worked at a mechanic shop. Catherine got pregnant at 19, and they stayed together. Isabella was born beautiful and healthy. Arthur looked at the girl in the garden, trying to process that she was his great niece, blood of his blood. But Lucas was a drug addict. He hid it well at first, but then the situation got worse. He would steal money from Catherine, disappear for days, come back aggressive. Hope's voice trembled. One night, he stole all the money she had saved to buy medicine for Isabella, who had a high fever. What happened? Catherine confronted him. They fought. He pushed her. She fell down the stairs of the tenement where they lived. Hope covered her face with her hands. The fall was bad. She hit her head, had internal bleeding. By the time she got to the hospital, it was too late. The silence that followed was heavy with pain. Arthur tried to imagine his sister's suffering, losing the daughter she had raised with so much effort. Lucas disappeared after the accident. We never saw him again. Isabella stayed with me, and since then it's just been the two of us. Why did you never come to me, Hope? Even after Catherine passed. Pride, shame. How could I show up at your door after 30 years, asking for help? You had become a successful businessman, married, with children. I was just a homeless woman taking care of a child who wasn't even officially my granddaughter. Arthur approached her again, and this time Hope didn't pull back. You are my sister, he said, hugging her tightly. Nothing that happened changes that. Hope broke down in her brother's arms, 30 years of pain and longing pouring out at once. I missed you so much, she sobbed. All these years, I missed you. Me too, Arthur murmured, his own tears wetting his sister's grey hair. Not a day goes by that I don't regret those terrible words I said. They remained embraced for long minutes until Isabella's voice interrupted them. Grandma, why are you guys crying? Hope pulled away from Arthur and knelt down to the girl's level. Isabella, my love, I need to tell you something very important. What is it? Remember how I always said you didn't have any more family in the world? Isabella nodded. Well, I was wrong. This gentleman here is my brother. That means he's your great-uncle. Isabella's big eyes turned to Arthur. Like the great-uncle in the stories Grandma tells? Exactly like in the stories, Hope answered, smiling through her tears. Arthur knelt beside his sister. Isabella, this means you're my real family, that you were always my family. And I can keep living in the pretty house. You can live here forever if you want, Arthur promised. At that moment, Martha appeared at the door, having heard emotional voices in the garden. When she saw Arthur kneeling next to the woman she knew only as Rose, both of them hugging Isabella, she knew instinctively that something fundamental had changed. Arthur, what's going on? Arthur stood up, still holding Isabella's hand. Martha, I want you to meet my sister, Hope Sterling. Martha's jaw dropped. She knew the story of Arthur's lost sister, knew how he blamed himself for the separation. She looked at Rose, Hope, with new eyes, trying to process the revelation. And Isabella, Arthur continued, is my great niece. Martha's world spun. The girl they had decided to adopt out of compassion was, in fact, blood family. Fate had conspired to reunite a family that didn't even know it was lost. But as everyone processed this extraordinary revelation, none of them noticed the car that had just parked at the mansion's entrance. Hans and Greta had returned early from their walk with Maximilian and Friedrich, and they were about to witness a scene that would completely change their own plans for the future. Hans and Greta entered the mansion's garden, holding the hands of Maximilian and Friedrich, expecting to find the usual afternoon tranquility. Instead, they were met with an emotionally charged scene. Arthur, Martha, and two other people embraced in a circle, all crying. Entschuldigung, Hans said in German, hesitating at the entrance. Sorry, did we come at a bad time? The interruption made everyone turn around. Arthur quickly wiped his face, trying to compose himself, but it was impossible to hide the emotional intensity of the moment. No, he said, trying to smile. Actually, you came at the right time. There's something important you need to know. Greta watched the woman she knew as Rose intently, noticing how she seemed different, more upright, with a dignity she hadn't perceived before. Maximilian and Friedrich ran to Isabella, who greeted them with her usual radiant smile, seemingly oblivious to the revelations that had just shaken the adult world. "What happened?" Greta asked, her maternal intuition sensing that something fundamental had changed. Arthur took a deep breath, still trying to process everything. "This is my sister, Hope. I haven't seen her in 30 years. Hans frowned, confused. "But we thought her name was Rose." "It's a long story," Hope said, finding her voice. "I used that name for years to protect myself." "And Isabella," Martha added, her voice still trembling with emotion, "is Arthur's great niece, blood family." The silence that followed was heavy. Hans and Greta exchanged glances, instantly understanding the implications of this revelation. The girl they had seen playing with their sons, whom they had unconsciously included in their future plans, was part of a family that was reuniting after decades. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" Greta said quietly. Arthur looked at her, seeing in the German woman's eyes the same painful understanding he himself was feeling. "It does," he admitted, "but not in the way you might be thinking." Friedrich pulled on his mother's hand. "Mommy, why is everyone sad? Isn't it good when families find each other?" The child's innocent question cut through the tension like a blade. Greta knelt beside her son. "It's very good, my love. Sometimes people cry when they're happy." "Like you cried when you found us at the hotel?" Maximilian asked. "Exactly like I cried at the hotel." Hope watched the interaction between Greta and the boys, noticing the patience and genuine love in every word. For 2 years, she had cared for those children as if they were her own grandsons, and seeing the natural affection between them and their real parents brought a mix of joy and melancholy. "Hans, Greta," Arthur said, "I'd like to propose something." The German couple turned their attention to him. "I know you came to the US to take Max and Fritz back home, and that's what should happen. But what if you considered staying here longer? Not just a few weeks, but maybe permanently." The suggestion caught everyone by surprise. Hans blinked several times as if he hadn't heard correctly. "Stay in the US," he repeated. "Hear me out," Arthur continued, the ideas forming as he spoke. "Your sons spent 2 years here. This has become their home as much as Germany, and now with Hope and Isabella being part of our family, well, you've become part of it too." Martha looked at her husband with surprise, then slowly nodded. "Arthur is right. You saved our children when they needed it. We are all connected now in a way that goes beyond simple gratitude." "But our jobs, our life in Germany," Greta began. "I can offer Hans a job at my construction company," Arthur said. "A German engineer would be a valuable addition to the company. And Greta, with your experience as a teacher, you could help establish a bilingual school here in Havenwood." The proposal was tempting, but Hans and Greta needed time to process. They had come to the US expecting a quick reunion, followed by a return home. Now they were considering remaking their entire lives. "It's a lot to decide at once," Hans said diplomatically. "Of course," Arthur agreed. "It doesn't have to be now. Stay as long as you need to decide." At that moment, Maximilian approached Hope. During 2 weeks at the mansion, he had developed a special affection for the woman who had cared for him during the worst moments of his life. "Grandma Hope," he said, using her real name for the first time, "if I go away to Germany, will you miss me?" Hope knelt to the boy's level. "I will miss you very much, Max, but the most important thing is that you are happy. And if I stay here, will my German parents miss me?" It was an impossible question to answer. Greta approached and placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "Max, you don't have to choose now. We'll figure out together what's best for everyone." As the adults talked, Isabella played with Friedrich near the garden fountain. She had vaguely understood that she was now part of a larger family. But for a 4-year-old, what really mattered was having people who loved her around. "Fritz," she said, "will you still be my friend, even if you find out you have another family?" Friedrich looked at her seriously. "You're my family now too. Grandma Hope said we're all family." The simplicity of the children's logic deeply touched the adults watching them. The children had understood something they were still struggling to accept, that family wasn't just about blood or nationality, but about love and mutual care. That night, after an emotionally charged dinner where everyone tried to process the day's revelations, a crucial conversation took place between Hans and Greta in their hotel room. "What do you think of Arthur's proposal?" Greta asked, brushing her hair in front of the mirror. "It's tempting," Hans admitted. "The boys are clearly happy here, and after 2 years living in the US, it might be more traumatic to rip them away from here than to let them stay. But our whole life is in Germany, our parents, our friends, our jobs." "I know, but Hans, look at our sons today. They were more excited and talkative than they've been since we found them. It's as if this place brings out the best in them." Greta stopped brushing her hair and turned to her husband. "Are you seriously considering this?" "I am. And you?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Me too. But I'm scared. What if we can't adapt? What if it's a terrible mistake? And what if it's not?" Hans countered. "What if it's the chance to give our sons something they couldn't have in Germany? An extended family, roots in 2 places, a story that connects them to people who love them unconditionally." In the Sterling mansion, a similar conversation was happening between Arthur and Martha. "You were impulsive today," Martha said, but there was no censure in her voice. "Offering jobs, a house, a new life, without even consulting me first." "Are you angry?" "No, actually I'm impressed. For the first time in 2 years I saw you truly happy today. When you hugged Hope, when you realized Isabella is your family. It was as if a part of you that was dead came back to life. And you? How do you feel about all this?" Martha lay down on the bed and looked at the ceiling, confused mostly. "This morning I woke up thinking we were going to adopt an orphan girl out of compassion. Now we find out she's already our family, that we have a sister-in-law we haven't seen in decades, and that we might have 4 children living in our house indefinitely." "It's a lot of change at once," Arthur agreed. "It is, but you know what's strange? For the first time since we lost Liam and Noah, I feel like our house is truly alive again." While the adults wrestled with life-changing decisions, the children slept peacefully, unaware of the weight of the choices that would be made in the coming days. But fate still had one final surprise in store for them all. A revelation that would completely transform the understanding of who truly belonged to which family. 3 days passed in a delicate dance of postponed decisions and restrained emotions. Hans and Greta had asked for time to consider Arthur's proposal, while they remained at the hotel, visiting their sons daily. The tension in the Sterling mansion was palpable. Everyone knew a crucial decision was approaching. It was a Saturday morning when Dr. Wallace arrived at the mansion with a grave expression. He carried a folder full of documents and tests he had discreetly ordered over the past few days. "Arthur, I need to speak with you urgently," he said, refusing the coffee offered by Maria. "And it would be best if Martha, Hope, and the German parents were present as well." The doctor's serious tone made Arthur's stomach clench. "Did something happen to the children?" "Not exactly, but there's important information you all need to know." An hour later, everyone was gathered in the main living room. Hans and Greta had come with Maximilian and Friedrich, who were gently directed to the garden with Isabella under Maria's care, while the adults assembled for what was clearly going to be a serious conversation. "During the exams I performed on the children," Dr. Wallace began, I noticed some inconsistencies that led me to request additional tests, not just on the boys, but on Isabella as well. Why on Isabella? Hope asked, immediately alert. Because I wanted a complete health picture of all the children involved. Dr. Wallace opened the folder, and the results revealed something unexpected. The silence in the room was deafening. Greta held Hans's hand tightly. "Max and Fritz are definitely your children," he said, addressing the German parents. "The DNA tests confirm it beyond a shadow of a doubt." Hans and Greta sighed in relief, but Dr. Wallace continued. "However, I discovered something about Isabella that changes everything." He pulled a paper from the folder. "During routine exams, I noticed she has a very rare blood type, AB negative, which occurs in less than 1% of the population." "And?" Arthur asked, not understanding the relevance. "I asked to compare it with old samples I have on file. Blood samples from Liam and Noah, collected during appointments before the accident." Arthur's heart began to beat faster. "What did you find?" "Isabella has the same rare blood type your sons had. Not only that, other genetic markers suggest there is a much closer connection between her and you than we imagined." Hope turned pale. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying it's genetically impossible for Isabella to be Hope's granddaughter." The silence that followed was absolute. Hope shot up from her chair. "That's ridiculous. Catherine was my daughter. I raised her." "Hope," Dr. Wallace said gently, "it's possible you raised a child who was not biologically yours. It happens more than we think, especially in situations of social vulnerability." Tears began to stream down Hope's face. "No, it's not possible. Catherine had my eyes, my smile. Physical similarities can be a coincidence, but genetic tests don't lie." Dr. Wallace turned to Arthur and Martha. "In fact, the markers suggest that Isabella may be directly related to you." Martha covered her mouth with her hands. "Are you suggesting that—" "I'm suggesting we do a full DNA test to be sure, but preliminarily, Isabella could be your biological daughter." "That's impossible!" Arthur exploded. "We only had 2 sons, Liam and Noah. There was never another child." "Arthur," Dr. Wallace said carefully, "do you remember Martha having any complications during the twins' pregnancy?" Martha turned very pale. The threatened miscarriage in the 5th month. You were hospitalized for 2 weeks. During that time, there was a suspicion you might be carrying triplets, but one of the fetuses seemed smaller, with delayed development." "The doctors said it was just a shadow on the ultrasound," Martha murmured, the memories flooding back like an avalanche. "Maybe it wasn't just a shadow. It's possible there was a 3rd baby, born prematurely during that hospitalization. A baby you were led to believe did not survive." The revelation fell upon the room like a bomb. Greta and Hans watched the scene in shock, while Hope cried silently, her entire understanding of the world crumbling. "But if that's true," Arthur said, struggling to process the information, "why did they never tell us? In the 90s, hospital protocols were different. If a premature baby was born with little chance of survival, sometimes families were spared the additional trauma. Are you saying our daughter was alive and we never knew?" Martha's voice was unrecognizable. "It's a possibility we need to investigate, but it explains why Isabella has such specific genetic traits and why you felt an immediate connection to her." Hans spoke up for the first time. "But how did she end up with Hope's daughter?" Dr. Wallace consulted his papers. "If my theory is correct, the baby must have been registered as an orphan and placed for irregular adoption. At the time, the system was chaotic, especially for premature babies needing special care." Hope lifted her head, tears still streaming. Catherine told me she was informally adopted when she was a few months old. The woman she called her mother said she found her abandoned in a hospital. Which hospital? Asked Dr. Wallace. St. Jude's Hospital, here in Havenwood. The same institution where Martha had been hospitalized during her high-risk pregnancy. My God, Arthur whispered. Is it possible? Is it really possible that Isabella is our daughter? There's one way to confirm, Dr. Wallace said. A full DNA test comparing samples from the three of you. I have contacts at the lab who can process it in 24 hours. Martha looked out the window, where she could see Isabella playing with Maximilian and Friedrich, laughing carefree. All this time, she was so close, and we never knew. We don't know yet, Arthur corrected. We need to be sure before we get our hopes up. Hope approached the window as well. If it's true, it means I spent 30 years caring for the daughter of the brother I abandoned out of pride. And that the girl I consider my granddaughter is actually my niece. Hope, Arthur said, placing a hand on his sister's shoulder. Regardless of the results, you saved this child. You gave her love and care when she needed it most. That will never change. Greta, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. If Isabella is really your daughter, our decision about staying or returning to Germany becomes even more complicated. Why? Asked Hans. Because it means Max and Fritz have a sister here, a sister who lost as much as they did, but who found a family that loves her. Greta looked at the boys in the garden. How do we separate a family that fate worked so hard to bring together? At that moment, as if sensing she was the center of the discussion, Isabella ran into the house. Uncle Arthur, Aunt Martha, Max and Fritz taught me a song in German. Want to hear? The girl's innocence, oblivious to the whirlwind of revelations happening around her, deeply touched everyone present. Here was a child who had survived unimaginable losses, who had found love where she least expected it, and who would now discover that her entire understanding of herself could change again. Of course, dear, Martha said, her voice choked. We would love to hear. As Isabella sang a German song with imperfect pronunciation but genuine enthusiasm, the adults exchanged meaningful glances. In 24 hours, they would know the final truth. A truth that could change not only Isabella's destiny, but that of all the families involved in this extraordinary story of loss, reunion, and redemption. The next 24 hours were the longest in the lives of everyone involved. Arthur cancelled all his appointments at the construction company, unable to focus on anything other than the possibility that Isabella could be his lost daughter. Martha spent the day watching the girl's every move, looking for signs she might have previously ignored. Hans and Greta, for their part, faced a complex, emotional dilemma. If Isabella was indeed Maximilian and Friedrich's sister, how could they consider taking the boys back to Germany and separating the siblings again? Hope suffered the most during the wait. For 30 years, she had built her identity around being Catherine's mother and Isabella's grandmother. Now, to discover that she had possibly raised her own brother's daughter without knowing was a devastating blow to her self-perception. How did I not see it? She murmured to Martha as they watched Isabella play in the garden. 4 years taking care of her, and I never noticed she looks more like you than me. We didn't notice either, Martha replied gently. And you loved her as if she were your own granddaughter. That doesn't change. That afternoon, Dr. Wallace called with the preliminary results. His voice was tense when Arthur answered the phone. Arthur, I need you all to come to my office now. All of you, including Hans and Greta. Did the results come in? They did, and there's something I need to explain in person. The drive to the office was silent. Arthur drove with his hands clenched on the steering wheel, while Martha held Isabella's hand, who seemed to sense the adult's tension without fully understanding what was happening. Uncle Arthur, Isabella said suddenly, Why is everyone so quiet today? Arthur watched her in the rearview mirror, noticing for the first time how her eyes were the exact same color as Liam's and Noah's. We're just thinking about important things, sweetie. Are they sad things? We don't know yet. Maybe they're very happy things. In Dr. Wallace's office, everyone sat in a circle. The doctor opened a new folder, his hands trembling slightly, something Arthur had never seen before. Before I share the results, Dr. Wallace said, I need to explain why I requested additional tests yesterday. What I initially discovered made me seek information in the old archives of St. Jude's Hospital. He paused, organizing the papers. Arthur, Martha, do you remember Dr. Robert Stevens, who monitored your pregnancy in 1999? I remember, Martha said. He retired a few years later. I managed to contact him yesterday. He's 78 now, but he remembers your case perfectly. Dr. Wallace took a deep breath. He confirmed that you had triplets, 2 healthy babies born at full term, and a 3rd baby girl born prematurely during the 5th-month hospitalization. The silence in the room was absolute. Isabella played quietly with a doll she had brought, oblivious to the magnitude of what was being revealed. The premature baby girl weighed only 1 pound and 12 ounces, the doctor continued. Her chances of survival were minimal, especially considering the resources available at the time. Dr. Stevens made the decision not to inform you about the premature birth to spare you from hopes that would likely be dashed. Tears began to stream down Martha's face. Our daughter was alive and we never knew. She was alive, but critically ill. She was in the neonatal ICU for 2 months, fighting for her life. During that time, a nurse at the hospital named Connie Santos grew attached to the baby. Connie Santos, Hope repeated. That was the name of the woman who raised Catherine. Exactly. Connie worked in the NICU, and when the baby finally stabilized, she made the decision to register her as an informal adopted daughter. At the time, protocols were lax, especially for babies the doctors had given up for lost. So, Isabella really is our daughter, Arthur whispered. Dr. Wallace nodded. The DNA tests confirm it with 99.9% certainty. Isabella is your biological daughter, Liam and Noah's sister. The revelation hit everyone like an emotional earthquake. Martha collapsed into tears, while Arthur remained paralyzed, trying to process that the girl he had decided to adopt out of compassion was actually his own lost daughter. Isabella, noticing the adult's agitation, dropped her doll and ran to Martha. Aunt Martha, why are you crying? Martha hugged her with an intensity that startled the girl. Because we just found out something very important about you. What? Arthur knelt beside his wife and daughter. Isabella, remember when you said you wanted to have a real family? The girl nodded. Well, we found out you always had a family. We are your real parents. Isabella frowned, confused. But you're Liam and Noah's parents, the ones who went to heaven. You are our daughter too. You are their sister. Isabella's young mind struggled to comprehend the information. So, Grandma Hope isn't my grandma? Hope, who had been crying silently throughout the revelation, approached. I'm your great aunt, my love, and I'm going to keep loving you exactly the same. And the German boys. Max and Fritz are your brothers of the heart, Arthur explained. You went through similar things, lost families, found each other. Greta, who had watched the whole scene, finally spoke. This changes everything, doesn't it? It does, Hans agreed. Max and Fritz have a sister, not just a friend, but a real sister who went through the same losses they did. What will you do now? Asked Dr. Wallace. Arthur looked at his daughter, his real daughter, trying to reorganize his understanding of the world. For 4 years he had mourned a child who was alive, being cared for by his own sister. For 2 weeks he had prepared to charitably adopt a girl who was already his by-blood right. First, he said, we're going home and trying to process this as a family. Then, we'll talk about the future. That night, at the Sterling mansion, an extraordinary scene unfolded. Hans and Greta had dinner with the family, watching Maximilian and Friedrich play with the one they now knew was their blood sister. The connection between the three children was evident. They had found in each other an intuitive understanding of loss and recovery. "Daddy Hans," Maximilian said during dessert, "can Isabella come with us if we go to Germany?" The innocent question crystallized the dilemma everyone faced. How could they separate siblings who had found each other against all odds? "Max," Hans said carefully, "Isabella has a family here, her real parents. But aren't you our real parents too?" The childish logic was irrefutable. Friedrich nodded vigorously. "And can't Isabella have two homes, like we have two homes now?" Greta exchanged meaningful looks with Arthur and Martha. Maybe there's a solution that works for everyone." "What do you have in mind?" Martha asked. "What if we created a truly international family? Max and Fritz spend part of the year in Germany with us, part of the year here with you. And Isabella does the same. She gets to know Germany, learn the language, and maintain a connection with her brothers." Arthur considered the proposal. "It would be complicated, but it would be love in its purest form," Hope completed. "Children surrounded by people who would make any sacrifice for them." Hans leaned forward. "There's something else. Greta and I have talked about your proposal for us to stay in the US, and we've decided to accept." The declaration surprised everyone. "Are you sure?" Martha asked. "Our children are here," Greta said simply. "Not just Max and Fritz, but now we know Isabella is part of their lives too. It would be impossible to separate them." "Besides," Hans added, "after almost losing our sons forever, we've learned that family is more important than career or convenience." That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Arthur found Hope on the porch, watching the stars. "How are you handling all of this?" he asked. "It's strange," she admitted. "For 4 years, Isabella was my reason for living. Now to find out she was always your daughter. It's as if the universe conspired to make me take care of my own niece without my knowing." "You saved my daughter," Arthur said. "You gave her love when I didn't even know she existed. How can I ever thank you for that?" "You don't have to thank me. Just let me continue to be a part of her life. Hope, you are family. You always will be." While the siblings talked in the children's room, one last important conversation was taking place. Isabella was lying between Maximilian and Friedrich, the three of them whispering in the dark. "So now we're real siblings?" Fritz asked. "We always were," Isabella replied with the simple wisdom of a 4-year-old. "We just didn't know it. And are we going to stay together forever?" "Forever," Max promised, "no matter where we are." And at that moment, 3 children who had known the pain of separation and loss sealed a promise of sibling love that no distance or circumstance could break. 6 months passed since the revelations that forever changed the lives of all the families involved. The Sterling mansion had transformed into a truly international home, where one could hear English, German, and children's laughter echoing through the halls at any time of day. Hans had integrated perfectly into Sterling construction, bringing German engineering techniques that elevated the quality of the projects to a new level. Greta, in turn, had founded the first bilingual school in Havenwood, where Isabella, Maximilian, and Friedrich studied together, surrounded by other children who quickly learned to see diversity as something natural and beautiful. The adjustment, however, had not been without its challenges. In the first few weeks, Isabella had nightmares where she would wake up screaming, Confused about who her real parents were, Maximilian and Friedrich also struggled with episodes of anxiety, fearing their new stability could suddenly disappear. "It's normal," Dr. Wallace had explained during a family consultation. "These children have been through deep trauma. Emotional healing takes time." Hope had found her place in the new family dynamic as the loving matriarch who helped connect all the dots. She moved into an annex, built especially for her at the back of the mansion, from where she could care for the children while also maintaining her independence. Her life experience on the streets made her especially sensitive to the emotional needs of the 3 children who had known insecurity. "Grandma Hope," Isabella said one afternoon, finding her embroidering on the porch, "are you sad that I'm not your real granddaughter?" Hope put down her embroidery and pulled the girl onto her lap. "My love, you're my great niece, which is even more special, and the love I feel for you hasn't changed one bit. But you took care of me thinking I was something else. I took care of you because you needed love, and you brought so much love into my life that it doesn't matter what we call ourselves." It was a Saturday afternoon when the first major family crisis erupted. Martha had gone out shopping when she received a desperate call from Maria, the housekeeper. "Mrs. Martha, come quick, Maximilian has disappeared." Martha abandoned everything at the supermarket and rushed home, finding the entire family in a panic. Hans and Greta searched every corner of the mansion. Arthur called every possible contact, and Hope comforted Isabella and Friedrich, who were crying inconsolably. "When did you realize he was gone?" Martha asked, trying to stay calm. 2 hours ago, Greta replied, her face red from crying. "They were playing in the garden, and when I came back to call them for a snack, Max was gone." "Did he say anything before? Was he upset about something?" Friedrich timidly raised his hand. "He got angry when he received a letter from Germany." "What letter?" Hans asked. "It was from Grandma Ingrid. She sent pictures of our house there and said she misses us." Hans and Greta looked at each other, immediately understanding what had happened. Maximilian was struggling with conflicting feelings about his 2 lives, his 2 families, his 2 identities. "Did he say where he was going?" Arthur insisted. "He said he wanted to go home," Friedrich murmured. "But he didn't explain which home." The search lasted 3 agonizing hours. Arthur activated his contacts at the construction company. Hans and Greta scoured every place Maximilian knew in the city, and Hope walked the streets near the river, fearing the boy had returned to the place where he was found years ago. It was Isabella who finally provided the crucial clue. "Uncle Arthur, Max always goes to the cemetery when he wants to talk to people who went to heaven." The cemetery. It was the place where it all began, where Arthur had wept for his lost sons, and where Isabella had appeared like an angel to change all their lives. Arthur and Hans rushed to St. Anthony's Cemetery, while Martha and Greta stayed home in case Maximilian returned on his own. They found the boy sitting before the empty tombs of Liam and Noah, talking quietly in German. "Max," Hans called softly. Not wanting to startle his son, Maximilian turned, his face stained with tears. "Daddy, I was talking to my brothers, to Liam and Noah." They would understand," Max said, with a seriousness that broke both men's hearts. "They know what it's like to have 2 homes, 2 families." Hans knelt beside his son. "Max, are you confused about where you belong? I don't know if I'm German or American. I don't know if I should miss Germany or if I should forget about it." Arthur joined them, sitting on the damp cemetery grass. "Max, can I tell you a secret?" The boy nodded. "When I was young, I fought with my sister and she left. For 30 years, I thought I had lost her forever. Do you know what I learned?" "What?" "That true love has no geography. No matter where we are, the people we love are always with us, here," he touched the boy's chest, "in our hearts." But Grandma Ingrid is all alone there in Germany. What if we brought Grandma Ingrid to visit the US? Hans suggested. She could spend a few months here with us. Would she really come? I'm sure she would, and then you would have all your family together. Maximilian thought for a moment. And Liam and Noah, will they be upset if I'm happy when they couldn't grow up? The question broke Arthur's heart. Max, my son, Liam and Noah would be happy to know you found a family that loves you. Real brothers want their brothers to be happy. That night, an important family meeting took place in the mansion's living room. The 3 children were present, as everyone had agreed there would be no more secrets in the family. You 3 have been through very difficult things, Greta began, and sometimes it's normal to feel confused or scared. Like when I dream I wake up under the bridge again, Isabella said. Or when I'm afraid you'll disappear again, Friedrich added. Exactly, Martha agreed. But I want you to know one thing. This family is forever. No matter what happens, you will always have a home with us. Hans spoke up. And we've decided we're going to take a trip to Germany for the holidays, all of us, so Isabella can see where Max and Fritz came from, and so you boys can show Grandma Ingrid your new sister. For real? Maximilian asked, his eyes shining. For real? And we're going to invite Grandma Ingrid to spend Christmas here with us. And I'll learn German properly, Isabella wanted to know. You'll learn German and Max and Fritz will improve their English. You will grow up speaking 2 languages and understanding 2 cultures. Hope, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. Children, do you know what the greatest gift life can give a family is? What, Grandma Hope? Friedrich asked. The chance to find each other, even after being lost. You 3 found each other against all odds. That's a miracle. Like when Uncle Arthur and you found each other too, Isabella observed. Exactly. This family was built from losses and reunions, and now we are stronger because we have weathered storms together. 3 weeks later, Grandma Ingrid Schmidt arrived in the US, a 72-year-old woman with white hair and blue eyes, identical to her grandson's. Her first reaction upon meeting Isabella was to kneel and hug her with tears in her eyes. Meine kleine Enkelin, she said in German, my little granddaughter. She doesn't speak German yet, Oma, Maximilian said, using the German word for grandma. Then I will learn English, Ingrid declared with determination. To everyone's surprise, the German matriarch's presence brought a new dynamic to the house. She taught the children German songs, cooked traditional dishes that filled the mansion with exotic aromas, and told stories from Germany that fascinated not only Isabella, but the entire family. It's incredible, Arthur commented to Hope one evening, watching Ingrid teach the children how to make German cookies. 6 months ago, I was alone in a cemetery crying for lost sons. Now our house is filled with 3 languages, 4 children, and more love than I ever thought possible. Love has that ability, Hope replied wisely. It multiplies instead of dividing. But the family's peace would be tested one more time when an unexpected discovery brought up questions about the past that everyone thought were resolved. The discovery came unexpectedly on a quiet Sunday morning, 2 months after Grandma Ingrid's arrival. Maria, the family's housekeeper, was cleaning the mansion's attic when she found a dusty box hidden behind old furniture. Inside were documents, photographs, and personal items dating back decades. Mr. Sterling, she called, coming down the stairs with the box in her hands. I found this in the attic. It looks like very old family things. Arthur was having breakfast with the whole family when Maria brought the discovery. Hope turned pale when she saw the box. She recognized some of the ribbons tying it shut. That box belonged to Dad, she whispered. I thought it was lost during the fight. Curious, everyone gathered in the living room as Arthur carefully opened the container that held his father's memories. Inside, they found old photographs of the Sterling family, documents from the construction company, birth certificates, and at the bottom, a sealed envelope with "For my children," written in their father's familiar handwriting. "A letter," Martha murmured. "Your father left a letter." With trembling hands, Arthur opened the envelope that had remained sealed for over 20 years. The letter was written on paper yellowed by time, but the words remained clear. "My dear children, Arthur and Hope," Arthur read aloud. His voice choked with emotion. "If you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer among you, and I hope you have found a way to overcome the differences that separated you." Hope covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. The children watched in respectful silence, sensing the importance of the moment. "I write these words knowing I made grave mistakes as a father. I favored Arthur in business simply because he was a man, following outdated traditions that deeply hurt my daughter. Hope was always as smart and capable as her brother, but my prejudice prevented me from formally recognizing it." Arthur paused in his reading, the weight of the guilt he had carried for decades intensifying. "Therefore, I have legally recorded that Sterling Construction is to be divided equally between my two children. Hope has the right to half of everything I built, as she has always been a true Sterling, even when I failed to treat her as such." The silence in the room was absolute. Hope shook her head slowly, the tears now flowing freely. "More than money or property, I hope you understand that family is the only true treasure in this life. May you forgive my mistakes and find in each other the support you should have always had." The letter continued with specific apologies and fond memories of his children's childhood, but it was the last part that touched everyone most deeply. "If you one day have children, remember, love doesn't divide, it multiplies. And may the next generations of Sterlings grow up knowing they are loved unconditionally, regardless of gender, nationality, or circumstances of birth. With all my love and regret, Dad." When Arthur finished reading, the silence continued for long minutes. Finally, he turned to Hope. "The construction company was always yours by right," he said. "I was afraid you wanted it to get revenge on me, but now I understand you deserve it for your competence and by inheritance." "Arthur," Hope replied, drying her tears, "I don't want half of your company, but it's yours." "No, I want something more valuable." She looked at the children playing in the garden through the window. "I want us to create a foundation for lost, orphaned, and abandoned children, using resources from the construction company." The idea struck everyone like a revelation. Greta was the first to speak. "A foundation for children like Max, Fritz, and Isabella were." "Exactly," Hope said, "so that other families can find each other, just as we found each other." Hans became excited about the proposal. "We could build a model institution here in Havenwood, one that serves as an example for the whole country, with a school, a temporary shelter, an adoption program, psychological support," Martha added, the ideas flowing naturally. Arthur looked at his sister with deep respect. "Hope, you've transformed our pain into something that can heal the pain of other families." Grandma Ingrid, who had followed the entire conversation in silence, finally spoke in broken but understandable English. "In Germany, we say that tears planted in the soil turn into more beautiful flowers." 3 months later, the Sterling Schmidt Foundation was officially inaugurated in a ceremony that brought together local authorities, families interested in adoption, and representatives of child protection organizations. The complex had been built in record time, combining Hans's German efficiency with Arthur's local knowledge. Hope was appointed president of the foundation, a position she accepted with the dignity of someone who had finally found her true purpose in life. "Every child we help here will be a tribute to the second chance we all received," she said during her inauguration speech. The foundation quickly became a national benchmark for family reunification and responsible adoption. The method developed there, which combined genetic investigation, psychological support, and post-adoption follow-up, helped dozens of families in its first months of operation. Isabella, Maximilian, and Friedrich became little ambassadors for the foundation, telling their stories to other children who arrived lost and frightened. Their experiences helped the new temporary residents understand that separations didn't have to be permanent and that love could create families where fate hadn't planned. "You know what's most incredible?" Dr. Wallace commented during a visit to the foundation, watching the children play in the colorful courtyard. "Every case we solve here is born from you having found each other." "Dad was right in his letter," Arthur said, hugging Martha as they watched Isabella teach English to a newly arrived German girl. "Love really does multiply." A year after the foundation's inauguration, the Sterling Schmidt family had settled into a perfect routine of international love. Hans and Greta took turns between the US and Germany for work, always taking at least one of the children to keep cultural ties alive. Isabella mastered German with impressive fluency for a 5-year-old, while Maximilian and Friedrich were completely bilingual. Grandma Ingrid had decided to stay permanently in the US, declaring that the heart has no passport and that her family was there. She became a volunteer at the foundation, telling German stories to the sheltered children and teaching traditional crafts. Hope had found in directing the foundation not just a job, but a calling. Every reunited family, every child who found a home, was for her a way of honoring all the losses and reunions that had brought her there. On a December afternoon, exactly 2 years after their first meeting at the cemetery, Arthur returned to the place where it all began. This time, he was not alone. His entire extraordinary family accompanied him for a special ceremony. They had decided to build a small memorial in the cemetery, not just for Liam and Noah, but for all the lost children who never found their way back home. The bronze plaque simply read, "In memory of the children who left too soon, and in celebration of those who found their way back to love." "Liam and Noah would be proud," Martha said, placing white flowers on the memorial. "They helped create a family bigger and more beautiful than we ever imagined." Isabella, now 6, held the hands of Maximilian and Friedrich. "Do you think my brothers who went to heaven can see everything that happened?" "I'm sure they can," Arthur replied, kneeling beside his daughter. "And I know they are happy to see how you 3 take care of each other." "Like a real family," Friedrich added. "The truest of all," Maximilian agreed. As the sun set over Havenwood, the family walked back home, where Maria had prepared a special dinner to celebrate the 2-year anniversary of their lives, intertwining so extraordinarily. At the table, surrounded by laughter, conversations in 2 languages, and the unconditional love that had transformed devastating losses into unexpected blessings, they all understood that they had lived a modern miracle. A story that began with tears in a cemetery had become proof that fate sometimes conspires in favor of love, that families can be formed in the most unexpected ways, and that the most beautiful endings are born from the deepest pains. The Sterling Schmidt Foundation would continue to help other families find each other, but that first family, built from loss, innocent lies, surprising revelations, and unconditional love, would forever remain an example that there is no distance true love cannot cross. And every night, when the 3 children fell asleep in their safe rooms, they knew they were simultaneously German and American, siblings of blood and of heart, orphans who had become princes of the love they chose to share. The yellow house in Havenwood had become home to a family that fate took decades to reunite, but which would now remain together forever. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.